Hello everyone, and welcome to yet another installment of Aurorin Expounded. Since last episode we talked about all the landmasses, continents, and countries, I thought it would be appropriate this time to tackle the topic of the different oceans and seas within the world of Aurorin. Now, the oceans do look pretty small on the world map, as you can see behind me. However, that map is not exactly to scale, and so the oceans are much larger than they are portrayed to be on the map. Due to the lack of, people and political structures within the oceans, this video is going to be significantly shorter than the previous one, but I'm sure you'll enjoy it nonetheless. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. Starting off our naval adventures is going to be to the very northwest of Uranus, an ocean known as the Dead Sea. Now, all the oceans this far north are pretty frigid. However, this one is a bit of a different kind of cold. The Dead Sea does not have floating glaciers or anything in it. It is just still. There is no movement going on a grand scale, which means it's a dead cold. Forgive the pun. Within the Dead Sea, there is a lot of bioluminescent aquatic life. The sea life there is also usually pretty smooth skinned, not very scaly, but the kind of fish that you'll see in our world that act as the deep sea creatures with like the see-through translucent skin where you can see all the inner workings. Most of creatures of that aesthetic are going to be found over in the Dead Sea. Sightings of undead creatures, crews, and ghost ships run abound within the Dead Sea. The ocean there is almost as smooth as glass. There is very little turbulence going on. While it can be spooky and offsetting, it is prime territory for fishermen. There is very little risk of capsizing unless you try to catch something that your boat is not equipped to handle. But a good lot of the creatures within that area are pretty shy, so there's not a lot of danger of it. But that can't be said for our next ocean. The next ocean is the Midwater Ocean, which is kind of cornered in by Uranus to the northwest, Phaeos to the northeast, Relendwell to the southeast, and Miscall to the southwest. The Midwater Ocean is probably the one that is most similar to our ocean here in the real world. You'll find a lot of the standard faring sea life like dolphins, whales, things like that. I would say it is pretty close to the Pacific Ocean in terms of biology and ecology. However, that does not mean it is the safest of the oceans because, like I said in the previous video, the Underdark lies beneath this ocean, and sometimes the bad things from there can break out and wreak some havoc. I'm not saying you'll ever find an aboleth anywhere on the surface, but if you were to see one, it would probably be in the Midwater Ocean. The Midwater Ocean is also dotted with plenty of islands full of pretty nasty creatures and critters, and as well as some tribal societies that it's agreed upon that there's not a lot of contact. And following the trend of having a bunch of different islands, let's head further south to the Mistwind Ocean. Mistwind Ocean is right here behind my right shoulder, in between Miscall and Relendwell on the southern end. Despite it being a deep ocean, it looks and acts almost like a swamp-like area. They do have many islands dotted throughout with many reptilian-style races that enjoy the warmth of the area. It is also very humid and full of incredibly poisonous fish and creatures throughout the whole area. Just underneath the surface, it is very rocky and uneven, so it is pretty hard for boats to navigate without getting cut from below by a random underwater mountain. There is also a good amount of underwater volcanoes that help heat up and bubble up the water around it. With such humid and warm conditions, the animals and fauna here are widespread. They are super varied and they are all over the place. The Mistwind Ocean probably has the highest concentration of sea life, and you'd probably get the biggest load if you were to throw in an entire net and pull it out. However, whether or not the things that you pulled out were edible or even usable is up for debate. Most interestingly though, the Mistwind Ocean is actually home to the world's largest trees that break the surface of the ocean. However, its trunk and roots descend all the way down to the ocean floor. and you bet your ass that there is plenty of creatures that live within these trees. These trees can vary quite a bit in size. There's some that are only about 5 to 10 feet thick in diameter, and then some can get up to several hundred feet, but it really depends. So along with the islands, you'll have these trees that kind of operate as little mini islands that it is safe to dock on, and some people even build little fishing villages from the trees, carve out little homes in them. But it's getting a little warm there. Let's head back up to the cold. Going back up north, up right over here is the Chiltide Ocean in between Uranus and Phaeos. The Chiltide Ocean is much more turbulent than the Dead Sea to the west, as there is a lot more fluctuation in currents. However, there is one thing that heavily influences this ocean above the rest. On that little landmass to the northeast of Truslid lies the Winter Gate to the Feywild. Now, the Feywild isn't exactly the most tame of ours, so as a result, the Fey weirdness kind of leaks out, and that spills over into the ocean around us. So you're going to be finding some really weird Arctic animals and plants going all over the seafloor there. It's almost as if like a radioactive spill mutated everything there, except instead of radioactivity, it's just magic and it's just weird. The fauna also tend to be incredibly large due to the influence of the Feywild, and as a result, they make for great eating if you have a ship powerful enough to haul one in. There's not really any terrain that could damage your boat. Most of the danger of capsizing is going to be coming from the creatures that lurk within. And immediately after that, let's go ahead and cross Phaeos and enter into the White Gale Sea in between Caranal and Phaeos. The White Gale Sea has very powerful winds and a lot of ice caps and glaciers. In fact, legend has it that it has once been possible to walk from Phaeos all the way over to Caranal across the ice caps. Whether or not that's true is up for debate, but that means there's a lot of ice around to where it is reasonable for people to believe it. Fishing there is pretty hard, as it's hard to get a large-scale vessel through all that ice. So most of the fishermen you'll get in that area are artisanal. They'll go out on their own, walk the ice caps, and bring in small hauls of fish. The fish around here are thick and blubbery. You'll also be finding plenty of seals and orcas in this area as well. While you won't get the highest quantity of fish here, the quality of the fish skyrockets within this ocean, seeing to that the fishermen primarily within the Dolas state are pretty well off because people will pay top dollar for those fish. If Alaskan salmon were a thing within this world, it would be found within the White Gale Sea. But let's go ahead and warm up again and go down south of Atheus. Now right here, we got the Stormveil Sea. This one is probably the single most violent and turbulent ocean within the world. So much so that the east coast of Hirashal and Naralen, the northern coast of Dunathir, and the southern coast of Atheus are beset by near constant rain. Any ships that sail within this ocean are super reinforced, and by that effect they become very slow, but they have to be, otherwise the ocean would rip them apart. Within the heart of the Stormveil Sea is something called the Everstorm, a massive hurricane that spins perpetually and has been spinning for, well, nobody knows actually. The storm is eternal and also attracts a lot of air, sea, and storm elementals to its location. However, fun fact, the eye of that hurricane is very calm, but it is nigh impossible to get into it without getting torn to shreds. But in the center of that hurricane is an island with one of the highest security prisons ever made in the history of Aurorin. People get in and out of there via teleportation circle. The creatures that lurk below within the ocean are also tough, very thick, scaly hides to avoid the pure force of what's going on. Long, powerful fins and powerful jaws to be able to crush the prey that have grown resilient to the force that this ocean puts out. If you really want to earn your salt as a fisherman, you fish in the Stormveil Sea. You'll be fighting both the turbulent waters, the extreme winds, and the massive, highly defended bodies of giant predatory fish that you're gonna have to fight against. People who sail the Stormveil Sea are said to be the toughest of the tough of sailors, and it is definitely not for the faint of heart. As such, there's also a lot of pirate activity that goes on within there because it's really hard to chase somebody when, you know, every single facet around you is trying to actively kill you. But as long as you sail down the channel between Relindwell and Alishkar, eventually the seas will calm down to the Swifttide Sea. The Swifttide Sea isn't as turbulent as the Stormveil Sea, however, it does have very powerful underwater currents. And just like the Mistwind Ocean, there's a lot of underwater volcano activity, and it is very warm and humid in this area. Due to the massive active volcano that sits within the middle of the ocean, breaking the surface, the ocean is quite often covered in ash, which feeds a lot of the flora within the ocean. So the Swifttide Sea has the largest coral reefs as well as the largest kelp forests and things like that. And the fauna, both small and large, are more than happy to take advantage of that. The fauna there are very good at camouflage for a lot of it because it is so colorful and vivid down there that that's pretty much the only way they were able to adapt. And if you want to see any sea turtles, this is probably the place you want to go. But there's still one more ocean we haven't covered yet. The Great Expanse remains unexplored. What you see here is all of the known world. However, the Great Expanse stretches all the way around the back of that globe. Some say that there is a hidden continent back there that nobody has discovered yet. Other legends believe that is where the precursors ended up actually going to. Some people spread rumors and tales of creatures so big they stretch from horizon to horizon. But the fact of the matter is, nobody knows. Nobody's been able to sail across it and make it back from the other side. So yes, that means if you want to sail from Valdish all the way over to the Hebdalian Federation, it is actually easier and faster to sail through the Midwater Ocean and then through the Stormveil Sea to get to there. So, at this point, the Great Expanse remains mostly a mystery, just waiting for those brave enough and powerful enough to sail across it. Thank you all so much for watching. This one was a much shorter video, I know. Just kind of had to get it out there, but it felt right to cover the oceans as soon as, you know, right after we cover the land masses. Tend not to spend a lot of time on the ocean in D&D campaigns, however, I wanted to make them so they are there if my players ever want to explore them. And to be honest, I have thought about running an entire campaign about sailing across the Great Expanse. But before I head out, I would just like to thank our patron D4Fan at the Adventurer tier. And I'd like to remind everybody that our Patreon is up and active, as well as the benefits of the Patreon, such as the Discord permissions, and you'll also get access to exclusive patron-only merch down the line. But with that out of the way, that's going to be it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and you have an awesome day. Bye-bye.